Hi, this is an easy level demo of painting a little piggy. You can paint along with me, or you could watch the video first and then paint along yourself later. In the description below the video, I've put links to be able to get the reference image, the line drawing, or a grid if you'd like to have a go at drawing it up yourself. I show you how to use masking fluid and apply the paint. So let's get going. In this lesson, we're going to practice the use of masking fluid to help us paint this little piggy. And this little piggy has got a lot of whiskers and hair that lead out into a dark background. We would find it very, very difficult to leave these little white shapes and paint into our background. So we're going to use our masking fluid to do that so that we can paint freely for the pig, take the masking fluid off at the end. So you will have your reference photo of your pig. You have a line drawing in an A4 size. You could print it out and do it in an A3 size if you'd like to do it bigger. Or you could print out the grayscale with the grid lines on there and draw your piggy up to whatever size you like. As long as you end up with this number of squares, it's basically 9 squares over the top of the pig that are important. The ones at the edges don't matter. And do 9 squares on your piece of paper, you'll get it to the size that you want. So the grayscale one is also very useful because you can see where the lights and darks are in the pig, sometimes more easily than you can in colour. So have yours drawn up in whatever size you like and we'll get painting. Well, I've drawn up just an outline of my pig. In this image here, his body goes right back into the shadows here. We're not going to be focusing on that. We're really going to be focusing on his face and those beautiful white hairs and whiskers. I've drawn mine up and my piece of paper is 31 centimetres wide, 28 centimetres high, or in inches, 12 by 11. So this is an A4 sheet, so you can see it's not an A3, it's between an A3 and an A4. It's just going to be a good size for me to be able to demonstrate painting this face. If I do it in an A4 size, for me, it's a little small and I tend to be very tight. If I can paint bigger, I much prefer. So I've got it in this size here. So I'll prop my image up over here so I can see it. But the first thing that we need to do is put the masking fluid on. Because if we get the masking fluid on now for the whiskers, we can then take the time whilst that is drying to make our colour choices and get around how we're actually going to tackle this project. The two implements that I think I'm going to try to put my whiskers down is my pointy palette knife here. I'm a bit concerned about how dirty it is on the end. I might look for another one. I think I've got one here that might be cleaner. Yep, so I might try that. And I'll use one of these little craft needle things. So having a look at the image here, we've got very long hairs that go out over the dark part of the piggy's top of his head here. So we need to be able to mask those out. He's got hairs that come out off the side of his ears, and he's got whiskers off of his nose, and I dare say off his chin here. So you do not have to be literal here and say, well, I can see 27 whiskers there, so I better do 27. You just have a look at it and give yourself some fun whiskers, shapes, and when you think you've got enough, it will be enough. So starting perhaps at the bottom of the ear here, when they're bunched together a little bit, I put the masking fluid down in like a little line and then try to drag myself some finer lines. Whoops, and there's a really big fat one. Now, a bit of advice here. If you get some fat marks that you don't want, you have two choices. You either carry on with your painting, knowing then that you've got to fix them up afterwards. That one's not working very well for me, so I'll go back to this one. You can fix them up afterwards, or as soon as it is dry, and you haven't even started painting, but as soon as this masking fluid is dry, you can just rub it off with your finger before you start painting. It may take off a couple of areas where you didn't want it to come off, so then you just put it back on again. But if you haven't even started painting, it will come straight off. So I have a fairly big blob of it here, which I can rub off before I start painting. So I will just move around here, putting in shapes as fine as I can so I don't have to do too much work. But it is my experience, and there's always something you have to do when you rub this off to just get something a bit more tidy. But there's no other way to do whiskers. So I'll just go off camera here and just carry on adding a few of these. And this is how you'll go about doing yours. I'm looking to see where they are on his body, but I'm not following how many and how long or where do they actually go. Well, I have my masking fluid on all of the areas that I wanted to retain white. And even trying to be careful, I've got some quite blobby bits, but I think I'll be able to just work around those shapes when I ultimately take it off and tidy it up a little bit that way. So I have the masking down, and whilst it is drying, I've got time then to have a look at how am I going to paint my little piggy and what colours am I going to use. So I'll just pop that aside whilst it's carrying on drying, and we can look at these colour choices. So if we were going to do this with our limited palette, which is our 2 reds, 2 blues, 2 yellows and our burnt sienna, then it's really quite achievable for this painting because it's not got a great deal of colour in it. We will be using our cool red, which for me is my permanent rose. And if I put it down in sort of a tea wash, I can get a very, very pale pink that I'm going to be able to use for the ears, little bits of colour on his face. But if I put it down a little bit heavier, it gives me another tone. But I could also use it in with a touch of burnt sienna in there, in with that permanent rose, and I've got these darker pinky brown bits inside the ears. So I'm putting our colour choices down, probably do it just like this. So I've got my permanent rose I'll be using. I will use my burnt sienna. Fresh burnt sienna out. I think mine's got a little bit dirty. Right, my burnt sienna, and I can make that combination there. Then I also look here, it looks browny black, the markings on the pig, but the eyes are very dark. So to be able to get dark, I will need to use my French ultramarine blue, which when I mix it with the burnt sienna that we've already made a decision to use, I can get quite a nice dark for the eyes, patches on his skin. And not only can I use it for the eyes with just the two colours, the burnt sienna and the French ultramarine, but I could put that pink into it as well, into that dark mixture for the nostrils, those really dark markings inside the ear, and possibly those dark markings up there. So that was a combination of the three colours here. When they greyed out, they look pretty purple there, but put them down again and leave them. There's the black. And there's the pinky part. So I think I could paint this entire pig painting just with those three colours. Permanent rose, or your cool red, burnt sienna, French ultramarine blue, or your warm blue. And we will get plenty of choice of shades with those colours. We've made our colour choices. We have our drawing done. We have our masking fluid on. So now we can get started with our painting. I'm going to do a background, just some darker colour, so that when I paint over where I've put the masking fluid here for the whiskers and hairs that go out into the background, you'll see them. If I don't put some colour around the outside shape of the pig, then there's not much point in having put the masking fluid there in the first place, because the paper would still be there with no paint on. So first of all, using those three colours that we've chosen here, I will use a variety of those to paint into the background. So for that, all I would do is perhaps, I'll start off with the background. Add a little bit of water, just clear water, round the outside of your drawing. And have a little bit of the colour out on your palette of each of the colours that we chose. So pink, brown and blue, and just drop them in. Doesn't really matter in which order you drop these in. We are just trying to make a little bit of a background so that our piggy whiskers and hairs will stand out. Because you've put water down for the shape first, when you add this paint, it's going to dry much lighter. Don't worry about the bit that's blobbed into there, doesn't make any difference. Piggy's got to have some colour on him. Now, the photograph is very, very dark background. However, I don't really want to use a lot of paint up just to copy the photograph. This is us using masking fluid, not necessarily just copying everything that's on the photograph. We've used the photograph to get the shape of our pig, but we make the choice about what we might like the background to look like. So wet round this side. You don't have to wet first. You could go straight in with the paint, but when you wet, you are guaranteed that it will be lighter. Also, if you don't think that you've made the perfect choice when you go in with your paint, of course, being lighter, you can go over it with something else. If you go straight in with the dark paint, you can't do that. So some more same colours. straight over the top of the masking fluid. Got a little bit more around this side so I can actually see my area where I've put the masking down. So there, we've gone around the Piggy. A little bit down in between his legs down here. Put this in as well. Now you can choose to make this darker after, but if you go in too dark to start off with, you're stuck with it that dark. So there we are. So we've got the background done. We've covered over the top of the masking fluid that goes into the background. And when that's dry and we take it off, we'll be able to see where we've left the white of the paper. So now I'm just going to let that dry and start working on our pig. There are areas on the pig that I can go into whilst it's drying. However, I don't want to drag my hand across there, so for just take a couple of minutes, I'll let that just dry before I carry on. Well, my background is not perfectly dry, but dry enough to carry on. We didn't put masking fluid, or at least I didn't put masking fluid in the eye area. And you always like to have a highlight in the eye, so you either try to leave a little mark there, a little piece of unpainted paper, or use a little bit of gouache at the end, or use the masking fluid first. So now I'm going to be painting the eyes. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. This is a number 8. And it's my synthetic, so it holds its point really well, which is really good for me doing the eyes. So the eyes are such a tiny little area that I tend to not try mixing it on the paper. I put the colour down, either one colour and then put another one on the top, or mix it in the palette. So just holding my reference so that I can see the eyes clearly, and maybe try and leave that little highlight if I can. But if I don't, if I can't leave a highlight, I will just put it in at the end. So I'm putting the brown down first because I make my black from burnt sienna and the French ultramarine blue as per our little swatch that we did. And I put the brown down first. It's just what I've always done, is put the brown down first. I'm just trying to paint carefully here, so I'm not speaking quite as much. Now I get the blue, and whilst this is still wet, I'll drop the blue in. And I'm really dropping tiny little bits coming off the tip of my brush into that wet pool of brown sitting on the paper. Then the blue combined with the brown will turn to black. And in some areas it will look slightly bluer, others slightly black, browner, but it will have variety. So there. I like to start with the eyes because I feel like then we've got something looking at us, urging us on to paint. So just follow the shapes that you can see to get your eyes down. I've got too much white left here, so I've got a little bit of masking fluid has gone really where I don't want it, and it's resisting the paint a little bit. So there's the areas that I mentioned will need fixing up after. There's not much you can do about it while it's on there. You just got to paint over it, and if when you take the masking fluid off, you don't want it white underneath, you have to go in with some colour. So there we are, we've put the eyes down. It's not a lot of colour on the face, however, it's a pale pinky whitey pig. It's got to have something. We can't go too close to our eyes because they are drying and they will just run down the page. So we'll have a look, and maybe we'll move up to this ear here whilst they're drying. You just need to be careful that you don't actually put your arm through it. I'm just going to let a little bit of that colour I've got there, which was pulled over the top of the masking fluid because the masking fluid was stopping it spreading around. I'm just going to let that go a bit further because there's marks around. So if yours has done that, if your masking fluid has left you with a bit of a pool of water, a pool of paint, wet paint, and it's not going anywhere, let it spread out a little bit further and do this colour round the piggy's eye. So, seeing I've got one side done, I think I better go and do it over here. So I'm using a little bit of the pinky, look, just the colours out of here. Bit of the pink, bit of the brown. Just looking at where I can see colour on my reference photo. And just putting a bit of colour down. And it's going over those white whiskers and even the eyelash area. If you get some paint and it's slightly different than what's on the reference photo, doesn't matter. This piggy will have unique little markings that no other piggy will have. They are all different, which means when you paint them, it doesn't matter if they look a little bit different. Okay, so we have the colour down on the eyes. So moving up to the ears. Now this is quite a big area, so I can use a bigger brush. If I use a bigger brush, two things. I'll get the job done quicker. The paint will go down and blend more easily and have less strokes joining it up. So always use the biggest brush that you can. The mop brush is really good. This isn't an overly huge one, but it still holds a lot more paint than the round brush. So either use your bigger round brush or a mop brush for this area. So still sticking with the same colours here, I'm going to put the pink down all over because I can add darker paint over the top where it's got to be darker, but I still need some paint in the light areas. So I might just put down 2 pink ears at this stage. Now with this one here, on this side, this goes against his body here, but here it's going into the background. Just you could paint close to the edge of your drawing and just leave a little white edge. And just put first washes in for the ears. Now we could put a little bit wet into wet there. So put a little bit of the brown in with the pink and just swirl a little bit here and a few strokes just here. It just makes a start with the extra colour that we're going to need in the ears. Don't worry if it looks like it's gone down a little bit dark. It will dry lighter. It's gone into wet paint. It will dry lighter. Okay, so we've now got some paint in the ears. Starting to look like a pig already. I've gone over the bit there, that doesn't matter, I can tissue that off, or if you get to it quickly enough, either do it with your brush or just carefully with the tissue. When I did this drawing here, so that we could see it probably easier on the video, my lines are a little bit dark. If I was painting this for myself, I would make the lines very, very light, or even don't have some of the lines and just give me the most important shapes. The rest of it I would paint with my brush, and if they're not quite accurate, makes no difference. Nobody's ever going to see this. They're going to see my painting of my pig. So I'm going to let those ears dry now. The eyes are probably still damp. It's actually quite a cool day here. I have got light shining in the window, but things are not drying that quickly. But rather than just wait, we'll move on to another area. As long as you keep moving around, you can carry on. So how about we use that same pinky colour we've got and get some colour down on the end of his nose. Now his nose has got, the nostrils are quite dark, which means that the original colour can go right over the top, because you will then paint the dark on after. So add the pink, a little bit of water there, so he's perhaps a little bit lighter just in there and in there. Water does help make interesting marks as well, which for texture on animals with fur and skin, it's really quite useful. So we don't worry about watermarks. We'll just go with them. There we are. So we've got the start of the snout or nose. Okay, so where else could we move on to? If I don't come too close to that ear there, I could get this back part of the body up in here and in here. So I think we'll just move on. So we'll leave the face and we'll now move to the body. And I'm just going to go to my number 12 synthetic brush, just so that I can get around these edges without getting too close to the ears. So I'll just make sure now, because it's in the darker area, that I've got slightly thicker paint to dip into. Where he disappears into the background here, looks like there's black markings on him here. Dark under his ears here will help his face be separate from his body, and his body separate from his ear. So dipping into the mixture, and it'll also make these hairs on the end of his ears. Stand out, which we will see, which we will reveal when it's dry. So slightly darker in under the ear, let it bleed away so it's much lighter as it comes out to the edge. It looks a little bit pinky brown. Just drop a little bit more blue in there. You can't really even tell from this photo what the colour is anyway. Bearing in mind this is still going to dry lighter, so it's best not to panic when you first see it, because if you go too light, then I would have to be going in with more. So there is a bit of a dark part there, but if I put that dark part in now, I'm going to invite that to run into this wet part that I've done. So the best thing I can do is skip that tiny bit there and get over to here. Now that is darker, so I will go in with my brown and blue mixture. It's probably got some black spots and markings on him here. So we will come down like this. Now I should be pretty safe alongside my background because that was painted a while ago. So rinse off my brush, add some water, use the paint that I've already put down there. And just smooch it around. You can make your pig as colourful as you like. The idea is that you've just got dark parts next to light parts, but the colours that you put down doesn't really matter as long as you're getting your lights and darks. So you put that down, really do a little bit of mixing around on the paper. Okay, so creeping up behind the ear here, it's also a little bit dark here. I'm going to leave just a little white edge there, so it looks like the light is hitting. It is hitting the edge of the ear, where the ear is really thin on the edge there, picking up some nice bright light. And then this comes down here into that darker shape. Straighten that up there a bit. So I'm just following what I see there, lights and darks, with those same three colours. The good thing is we do not have to make any colour choices here. All we've got to do is follow our little guide of the photo about where to put it a bit darker, where to put it a bit lighter. There we are. So I've left a little white strip here, white strip there. This shouldn't have really been white just there. It can blend out. This is looking very orangey there. I might have to put some dark over that when that's dry. The whole time I'm painting, it's safe to do whatever I'm doing because I've got that masking fluid protecting the area that I do want to remain completely white. So let's call that the fading out of the body over that side. This part of the body here is really not got very much on it at all. So what we'll do is maybe paint these dark marks here around the ear and use a little bit of that to go up into the body. So we've got our brown, we've got our blue, oh dear, there we are. Sometimes it is a case of back and forward until you get what it is that you like, and I might have a little bit of that pink in it as well. So just below the ear here, starting in here where the whiskers are at the top is very dark. So I'll put some dark paint in there and we'll let it feed in around the side of the eye and down his cheek there. Rinse out the brush, touch that paint where it's going to be lighter, and just use the paint that's already down there with the damp of your brush for it to go into there. And here there's white hairs over the top of those markings, which we can't do, but we can do the dark markings into the white. So that's what we do. It's looking a little brown here, so I'm going to drop a bit more blue in. Rinse out my brush, and now just let some of this come over here to make these little marks. Marks on the body, because he's not really totally white. Another bit up there. So you can see it's just a case of following around where you can see dark and light. And this Piggy's markings are not even the same from one side to the other. So really, it doesn't really matter what you do with your markings. Put the paint down, rinse out the brush. And use that paint to move it in the water where you need it to go. Water is what carries our pigment. Without water, it goes nowhere. Right, I was wondering if I'm going to have to stop for a minute and just evaluate what's going on here. Painting, talking and videoing at the same time sometimes makes it very hard to look at everything. So if I see it a little bit dark, I just dip into the pools of paint, still the same three colours. That's the beauty of this. We don't have to be thinking too much about our colour. So I'm just going to stop for a minute and just see where it is I've got to go from here. I think I'm just going to go to my slightly softer, smaller brush. There's not a lot of colour down on here. The moment I touch that dark area here with my brush, it's going to invite it to come down here. I want a little bit of colour, but not all of that. So I may just start below it a little bit here with a bit of clean water, then just pick up just a little bit of colour from off my palette and just drop it in here. To carry on putting colour on the face. And we can see that it's got whiskers up in there that I didn't do. Whoops. So that's what happens when you invite it to go in, but I really don't want this hard edge here. So I have to tickle it. If you don't want a hard edge, you've got to touch the edge of it and soften it with your brush so that it doesn't dry like a solid line. Not so bad over this side because I can see that I've put my masking fluid down and the whiskers have gone over the top. But over that other side there, I didn't do such an accurate application. That's when it comes back to bite you. When you see them, when you start painting over the top of it, oh, I didn't realise that I had done it like that. Right, okay, moving down here now. Just a little thin washes of colour. So even if a subject is fairly white, we have to put some colour on it. it's going to be picking up colours around it. And we need some colour down here because all of those lovely whiskers off his snout won't show up if we don't have some colour around behind them when we take off the masking fluid. So just mixing it up, still just with those three colours, but trying to get a little bit of variety in their application. Quite dark just here, that helps. It will help bring out his nose there. Comes round onto the side of his face. Do the same thing on that little bit edge there. Bit on the edge of his nose. Little bits of colour. Drag down. You know, and my Piggy might end up not looking exactly like that Piggy, but I'm just going to be happy if he looks like a Piggy. Because as I say, I'm not going to be showing anybody my reference image and say, do you think I've made the Piggy the same? Now, this is where he ran too much there. So if I quickly, while it's wet, dampen him out. Okay. Just moving around. In colour where I see it, and as it dries, if it dries too light, I know that all I've got to do is go and put a little bit more in. So I'm going to come over here now to this side under his face here that goes down into his leg. This is really quite dark here, and that will help me when I take off my masking fluid to see my whiskers that I've put down this side. That needs to be quite a bit darker there, but anyway, that'll do for a minute. Moving on. Have I got the same sort of thing on the other side? I have. I've got a lovely dark part here, which will help this side. I think he actually blends right in up here, so I'll just come down there like that, under his cheek there, comes down there, goes around, and then we'll let that let's mix down into here for this leg. Soften it there. Okay, there's a bit of a hard line there, which we don't want. I should have noticed that before. So if you've got a hard line that you don't want, you've got to just get the damp brush, and with the damp brush, tickle away at the paint, loosen up that hard line, and soften it. In doing so, I've let that blue run into his cheek here, which I don't want. So a little bit of damping down, just carefully with the tissue. What you don't want when you do the tissue is you don't want to put it down like this, and you're not after this. It's still got to be soft. Soft and careful. Okay, so I've got dark either side, so I've got getting his face out. Now this part here of his face, oh sorry, his body, is similar colours to at the top there. There is colour there, even though it's quite light. It's still got to have some colour on there. So just using up what I'm already using. Let's come here and just apply some colour on that side. Oh, we're well on our way to almost being finished here. So I want that much darker there, but it's wet, so I don't know if that's going to work if I try putting that in now. Right, this one here. I can touch this up a little bit when it's dry if I feel like it needs a little bit more colour. Let's say that's that. So let's put the darks into our ears up here, and we really are getting there. So I can see what I've got going on here. This needs a wee bit of colour over here as well, just to and that's dry there now from when we did the first time. It's quite a bit in shadow over there. It's up with this up there. Right. Okay, this little bit here. Okay, let's move on to those dark areas in the ear. So it's really the same sort of depth of colour we've got down here, but it's got more of the brown in it and a touch of that pink. At least that's what I see in it, so this is what I'll be using. So without putting my hand in what I've got going on here, which I think I probably will be doing, I will just get a bit of strong colour. The ear is dry here from that first wash that we put down. So it's just a matter of making a few dark shapes on the top. I haven't got these drawn, so I'm just eyeballing the shape. If it's not exact or in exactly the same place, it really doesn't matter, because as I say, even his ears don't match. So if his ears don't match, who knows which one we've done. Just put the dark down on that side. Touch your paint you've put down with a damp brush. Just let it flow up onto the inside. Now I can see that I don't have enough pink in the ear up there. I can't add that right now. I will wait. I'm just going to just put the darks in, but it's by having put the dark in now, I can see now that it needed a bit of extra colour. So I can go over that with a bit more of the rose when that's dry. It's got a wee bit on the edge round here, just as it comes round there. And the same sort of thing over this side. So the same mixture, if you've mixed up enough. I can put my hand down on the other side now because that part there is dry. So coming inside the ear here, all the way down, a little bit of a shape there. Shape. Comes out. Need a bit more mixture. Want a bit purple. Just add a bit more brown into it. And the ear comes down in here. And then it goes up. It comes down here. Rinse out my brush, use the paint that I've put down there to soften that and bring that up into his ear more. Take a little bit of this colour. It's already on my palette here, and just strengthen up a little bit of this. Take your Piggy as far as you want. This idea of this is to have done the masking fluid. However, you don't have to paint as many applications of paint on yours if you don't want. When you feel like you've done the lesson and got your Piggy the way you want, you can call him done. My eye's telling me, you see, I've got to add a bit more paint in here. So I'm just following the light and dark really that I can see. Wow, he's got big ears. He has got big ears. And this turns a little bit bluer here. Put the colour down, smooch it around a little bit. We're nearly done. A little bit of on the edge there too. So what will make this look different than looking at the photograph will actually be, we've got a light pig. This is a light pig. But this is very dark on the background and ours is not. So this is where you make a choice. Do I now go in and do a little bit darker on the background? Let's put these nostrils in first. So heavy paint at the top, or put your shape down at the top. Rinse off your brush, take off the excess moisture and drag the colour down, because as it comes out from inside that nostril out into the light, it will be lighter. So that's how we get that to be lighter. Now I'm not sure if this is a bit of stuff he's got going on in his face, in his is he eating something, or but let's just strengthen that up a little bit there. I mean, they have always got little spots and bits and pieces going on their nose. So put a few of them, put them even where you can't see them if you fancy having. So I'm just strengthening up the pink on this. Until you actually start covering up some of the paper, you can't tell whether you've put something down strong enough, because it's all relative. So after you've started adding some more paint, you realise that a part that you thought was dark isn't dark any longer and requires a bit more. So you just build it up. And this is the same whether it was a pig that you were painting or a bird, a boat, beach scene. It's all a case of just building up the colour until you feel like you've got how it needs to be. So I can see I'm happy with how that's gone over there. This perhaps should come maybe just around a little bit there and a little bit over here, just to emphasize his nose sticking out. That looks better. Okay, this eye here, I'll put a little bit more into there. Don't forget, anytime you need to take a break, you stop the video. You're either painting along or you're going to wait until you've watched the whole thing. But you stop the video, stop and start anywhere you need to. I'll just strengthen that little bit inside there. And this eye here, I'm just going to strengthen this up. And there. That one's okay. And that's, as I say, this one's gone like this because of that masking fluid being in a slightly different area. Strengthen up under here with that extra bit of dark. And same over this side, that'll help that lovely whisker that I've got coming out here. This needs a little bit of pink in here. Probably a bit more there. Very hard to see where his legs here start and the background is, and that background will need to be darker. Blend into there a little bit, and I'm going to make it a little bit dark here. Okay, so it's time to evaluate and see what we've got. I don't think I need to put any more colour onto the Piggy's body here. I'm quite happy with that. This here, perhaps just a tiny little bit in there maybe. What have we got going here? Just a little bit of something there. Not so much over this side. But certainly a bit of it's gone up there. And just a little bit of a colour into that bit. This could be a little bit more colour up here, so we'll just go with the colour that I've already got mixed on my palette with my soft brush, and just put a bit more colour there, and a little bit there. Okay, so I think I will stop here, she says. She's still going. Stop there and darken up the background and call it done. Dry him off and take the masking fluid off. Now this is a very achievable project for you. It looks like a lot of painting, but I've had to try and make my choices and talk at the same time. You don't need to do that. You could watch the video in its entirety and then you'll know what you're doing before you get going. And as I say, you can put as much down or simplify it if you like, as long as you're going to get the idea of what the masking fluid is going to do for you. So this here is not dark enough just in there, so I want to just quickly go in and just darken up just in there. So there's too big a difference between the dark part that I put in and the light part. And that's really what it's all about. When something dries, you have a look and you say, oh, the dark looks really dark, so I better darken up the lighter bits to make it a little bit more uniform. That's really what it's about. It's going to be interesting to see. There'll be a tiny bit of work to do on this when we take off that masking fluid, because as I say, it will leave some funny marks that you weren't quite expecting, that just need changing a little bit. Let's feel like these just look like they just need messing up a little bit. So if something looks a bit too neat, touch the edge of it, softens up the line and lets it meld more into the shape and not look quite so cut out. Okay. I'm going to go in now with some really dark around the outside. I wasn't going to do that really dark, but I can see that I can't get my Piggy to look off the page enough, leaving the background light. So you have to make that decision yourself. You may have done yours not quite as light as him anyway. So you may not have to add as much. You may not have to add yours. This is where in watercolour we have to work with everything that has happened on our painting, not something that's happened on someone else's. Yes, you can get the guide by what's happening, but the tweaking and little bits that you've got to consider are pertinent to your painting and not to anybody else's. Okay, so I'm going to mix up some darker colour now and try and quickly get it in on the outside. We might just do that really fast. I've rubbed off my masking fluid, and now I have to have a look at what I've got and say some areas they might be just a little bit too much white left there, and just take the paint that I've got on the palette and tissy into those little white shapes. Being very mindful not to undo all of the good work you did saving the white shape. So you have to just do this a little bit slowly. So there's white eyelashes over this side here. I don't want to lose those. But this has got a little bit big and blobby over here. So I just put some little shapes of colour back in between the hairs that are there. He's a very, very hairy chap. But that's okay. That's a little bit of fun. So if any look a bit too wide, just go on one side of them and just put a little edge to them. That will narrow them down and also give them a dark side and a light side. I don't like that sharp shape there, so I'll just come down there with that a little bit. Getting round onto this side here, I got a bit blobby here when the masking fluid went down. So I need to come in with my almost background colour paint here and thin out some of these thicker lines. Nearly there. It's happy with the eyes, eyelashes, lots of lovely hairs all over the place coming out of his eye area. Some up here on his ears are okay. Come down to these ones off of his chin. If there's a blob there, just narrow it up a little bit. I think that's it. I think that's it. I think we can call that done. So there we go. One little Piggy. And I think we've met our brief. We've drawn him up. We've used a limited palette and we've had a go at using masking fluid. where you go with masking fluid in your painting journey. You'll find out whether you love it or hate it, and you just might be like me and only use it in places where you can't manage little tiny shapes, but certainly don't think it's needed for doing big white areas, because you are capable of painting around those. That could just be a little bit darker there. There, I'm going to stop. So I do hope you have fun with the little piggy, and good luck with all that masking fluid.